sports illustrators in the world, with clients including Rolling Stone, Nike, the New Yorker, the New York Times Magazine, Vice, Tennis Magazine, and ESPN. And so let's welcome Mickey. Hi Mickey, how are you doing?
Hi, Pooh. Thank you so much. Thank you, Amy,
Yes, we are very honored to have you this evening and morning there.
That's right. Yeah. No, this is a real thrill for me. Obviously, the Indonesian embassies. I think this cultural exchange program is so important. I'm an American artist, but what we're talking about are ideas that cross borders and are important to discuss because art is reflective of our values, and so that's what we're really talking about. Aside from filmmaking and animation and all of this, it's what we value and what we spend our time making and sharing with one another.
Sure. And so, Mickey, I will not interrupt more the presentation, so I will give the time to you to have your presentation.
Okay, great. Well, I want to just start by saying that what we're going to discuss today. So, as you heard in the introduction, my way of filmmaking is taking a hybrid approach between doing shot footage and interviews, but also including this like really strong visual language in the form of animation, but also hand-drawn lettering and different visual elements, and all of that comes from my start being a visual artist, being an illustrator. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a story of how I got started into directing film, and how I kind of have my system of creating documentaries with animation. I'm going to share my presentation here. Okay, so this is called Making Losers. Just to kind of start, I want to share that these are some of the. I started my career as an illustrator, not even as an animator. I did drawings for magazines and newspapers and book jackets and apparel, and I had a real focus on sports. I did that for about 10 years. I went to school to study illustration, and I did that for a while, had a really good and fun, satisfying career doing that. But after a while, I really wanted to get more into storytelling. That was something that I didn't feel was something that I could explore that much in the work that I was doing. So I was looking for ways to do more of that. I had a couple friends who were experimenting with some basic animation, doing it through Photoshop, which was a program that I use every day in my work. Guys like Dash Shaw and James Blagden are illustrators, and they were just doing these really simple animations with their work, and I thought that might be a fun thing for me to explore as well. So I started to do these little basic animations, not that many frames, not 30 frames a second like you would see for a major animation studio, but only maybe 2 or 3 frames a second, very graphic and choppy. But I thought it was fun to see the work come to life in a different way. There seemed to be some new things to explore. So I was doing this and sending those little animations around to the different clients that I would work with. And I got an opportunity to work on my first documentary, which was directed by a guy named Mike Bonfiglio in New York. And he really liked my work. He liked these very simple animations that I was playing with. And his film was about an athlete named Bo Jackson, who famously in the U.S. played American football and baseball, professional baseball at the same time. And Bo growing up had all of these, there were all these stories about him where he would do these amazing physical feats that were not caught on camera, but there were these stories, these larger than life stories about him. So because there were no photos, because there was no video footage of this, the director came to me and said, well, you can use your skills as an animator to bring some of those stories to life. So, rather than doing a recreation with an actor or something. So they brought me in to their production company and they showed me a rough cut of their film. And the sequences that they wanted me to animate were right at the beginning of the film. But it was funny that day. I had actually stayed up all night working on a deadline for another project, so I was in kind of a weird headspace. And when I watched the film, I got all of these ideas of how we could maybe use animation and graphics in other ways, rather than just keeping the animation at the very beginning of the film. How to kind of do a visual treatment for the entire film, doing hand-drawn lettering, lettering lower thirds, introducing different characters in the film through these kind of illustrated, almost baseball card type images, and they went for it. So the director was excited about it. He let me do it. So I got started working on the project, and animation was still really new to me. So I was still drawing everything on paper, which is how I did everything during my illustration career. And it was just a real opportunity for me to explore all of these different kind of ways of bringing a story to life through animation. And I mean, I did so many drawings over a period of I think 4 months. I worked on that project. And this is an example of one of the finished drawings in ink that I would scan in color in the computer. So here's one of the finished frames. This is one of the physical feats that Bo was said to have done. Jumped 40 feet over a ditch. And here's another story of him angry as a young man, getting into a fight with some neighborhood kids. But here's an example of something else that we did, where we introduced a different character through this very stylized treatment. Instead of just including information in a lower third about someone, to say who they are and where they came from, kind of did it in this fun way, where we brought different information onto the screen. And also here's an example of a hand-drawn title that I did for the film. I think I ended up doing about 30 or 40 titles for the film, different dates, different things like this. So that was really, really exciting for me. And the film came out on ESPN, which is the largest sports TV network in the United States. And the film did really, really well. So I think it was their highest rated documentary for a number of years. So all of a sudden people started to associate me with being an animator rather than just an illustrator. And that created an opportunity for me a couple months later when I pitched a story to ESPN's website, actually, that I wanted to do kind of a written and illustrated thing for them. And they said, well, we really love your animation. Instead of doing just a blog post, would you be willing to turn that story into an animated short? So I had never aspired to being a documentary director. Like I said, I went to art school to be an illustrator. I didn't go to film school. I'd never really even been trained as an animator. So this was something that was going to be a whole new direction for me, something that I wanted to take a chance on. And I said yes, because I had had such a great experience on the Bo Jackson film, where the director really brought me into the process and, introduced me to their editor and to their sound designer. So that was a really exciting process for me.
Sorry for
Uh,
jumping a little bit, Mickey. I just want to express my comment that lack of sources sometimes bring us to more creativity.
Definitely.
Yeah.
No, I found that to be a really exciting opportunity, and
Yes.
a little intimidating too. But it wasn't, them asking me to make a feature film. I think the first film that I ended up making was only about 7 minutes
Mhm.
long. Uh, one last thing about the Bo Jackson film that really got me excited about documentary filmmaking. After the film came out, it was made for TV, so the big premiere was on TV. But to show the film to some people in the sports world, the director of the film rented a theater in New York and premiered the film in front of an audience and brought everyone who worked on the project, including myself, and um, including myself and the whole team sitting in the back. And they screened the film. This was the first time I'd ever seen any of my work, on a big screen with a live audience. So it was very different and exciting. And there was one part of the film where they discuss an injury that Bo Jackson had that actually ended his career. And they had someone, a doctor on screen, talk about how he dislocated his hip. And when he did that, it actually severed a major artery in his hip. This was something that was always confusing for sports fans, and this was something that we were able to bring to life through this anatomical drawing that I did. And in the part where they describe exactly what happened, I'll just show you. I did this little animation here where you can see the leg pop out of the joint. And in the theater, when they played that part, and the hip socket popped open like that, everyone in the theater went like like that, and were either horrified or disgusted, and that reaction really stuck with me in my mind because it was such a simple just sequence of drawings, but it made such an emotional impact within the structure of this documentary film that had, sound design and music to it, and obviously the story that the director put together. So that moment really stayed with me because it felt very different than the way that my work, kind of impacted people prior to that. And when I got the opportunity to direct my own short film, I thought, well, there's more emotional potential to explore in animation within storytelling. So I want to describe a little bit of how I figured out, how to incorporate animation into a documentary film. Uh, we're not going to talk that much about, the production side of filmmaking, which is, how to use a camera to set up an interview and light it and shoot B-roll and all of that. I'm really going to focus just on the animation, which happens mostly in post-production, um, because I feel like the way that I do it is not like how an animation studio really does it. I feel like I do take an artist's approach, kind of an indie, almost one-man approach, because like I said with the Bo Jackson film, and also how I did my first few short films, I did all the art myself. So this is how to do it on a smaller scale. And if there are any directors out there or students who might want to experiment with this, here's my little system of how to try doing that. So step one is taking field notes when you're out shooting your film or doing interviews. You'll want to start thinking about animation early. I'm always thinking visually. That's, I think, a more natural language for me to think of things in, given that I'm a visual artist. But I think, you know, if you're thinking about how to use animation in your film, start thinking about it early. With regards to the blackjack episode that we're talking about today, some ideas that I had coming out of his interview, how Jack knocked his teeth out as a kid, a montage of Jack getting kicked out of the many schools that he was kicked out of, and when he played at the West Fourth basketball courts for the first time. Those are kind of, very famous basketball courts in New York City, and that's where he got, some of his street credibility. So those were sequences that I thought, I would really want to explore in the episode with him. So step 2 is, once you get into the edit, you start by doing a radio cut or an audio cut, where not everything is, you don't have the entire film edited, but, you have the main subjects telling the story. And for the parts where it seems like, you want to explore including animation, what I do is I just put, black slugs into the timeline, and, I'm sitting there with my editor, and we'll talk about different ideas of, what the animation is showing, and he'll just type in into Premiere some ideas that we'll have. So for this sequence that I'll kind of give you beginning to end how we did it, is when he was at West Fourth, showing the guys there his amazing skill. So we just typed in Jack rolls basketball across his shoulders, like doing this kind of fancy trick, throws it off the backboard and slam dunks the ball. So just for this radio cut, we'll do that, from the beginning to the end of the episode. Just sort of typing things in. It's before any drawing gets done, and usually, even when you're playing the film and watching it down, you can start to imagine how those sequences will play. So after that, if everything feels like it's cohesive, it's working well enough, this is when the drawing begins. I don't usually show people this stuff because it's still rough and really early, but I still like to draw on paper. I know a lot of people like to draw, straight into the computer or on iPad nowadays, but I still like to lay things out on paper. And you can see in the middle of this frame, there's the shot of him, or there's a little drawing of him rolling a ball on his arms, and then a little backboard, and on the bottom right, it shows him dunking the ball. So that's just for me to get my head around some of these visual sequences, how they'll look. I try to not plan them with hugely elaborate amounts of motion, because I know that even on Losers, when I did have a small team of animators helping me, less is more, because I didn't want to have it get out of hand with how much work I was asking everybody to do. So I'm always looking for limited solutions because I work with a small team. So I plan it out like this. After I get some thumbnails that feel like they're working, I move on to what I call a rough stage. It's doing rough storyboards, and color was so important in Losers. Every single episode had its own distinctive color palette. So when I was doing the rough storyboards, I would start to bring the palette into the drawings. And as you can see, these drawings are pretty close to the thumbnails that I drew. And once I do these rough storyboards for each of the animated sequences, step 5 is placing those roughs into the cut. So where previously they were those slugs that just had the written descriptions, now I'll put those rough storyboards into the cut. And I have to say, with these rough storyboards in there, you really get a sense of how the film is going to play. And I really, get to almost a locked cut with these rough storyboards. I add some sound design to it. I fully pace it out. I don't leave it, with extra space around anything. I really try and cut it pretty tight, to the point where, you can watch the episode down and, totally understand what's going on. Moments that are supposed to be funny should be at least, somewhat funny. Moments that are dramatic should have drama in them. There's not a real huge emotional difference between these rough boards and the finished animation. So once you get it working to this degree, step 6 is finishing the art and replacing the rough boards in the cut. And I mean, you can notice just through this process that, things from the very early thumbnails to the finished animation, there's not a wild difference. It's just about kind of refining it more and more. In the final art, of course, you get a little bit more expressive, and you smooth things out to a degree. But each step is important and doesn't take a huge team to do. I would say even for directors who aren't visual artists, that if this is something that you want to try, I would recommend that you at least try to do the thumbnail sketch part of this process. It really goes a long way, and putting those into the cut, you could still see how things work or not. So just with regards to how animation played a storytelling role in our series, I would say that it probably took up a third of the runtime in Losers, in each one of the episodes. And like I said, when I first worked on the Bo Jackson film, I've always been really interested in the emotional potential in animation, using those sequences within a documentary. And the series, because so many of these sports stories had different highs and lows to them. Some of the stories were funny. Some of the stories, like Surya Bonali's, was very very and tragic. There was an episode that had a crime component to it, where we recreated a crime in animation, and one of the episodes, the boxing episode, actually had some fairly graphic and scary sequences in them as well. And I felt that not only did animation give me as a director a real efficient tool to be able to explore all of those emotions, but actually when the series came out, I found that our audience really understood and appreciated the animation for the storytelling role that it played in each of the episodes. So, my self-consciousness sometimes is that, well, because not every documentary has animation, maybe there's going to be a certain portion of the audience that's going to, every time animation comes on, they're going to think, oh, this is horrible. Why didn't they just, get some footage to put in there, or do recreations in a different way? But I felt, to my surprise and my, satisfaction, that actually our audience really responded positively to the animation, and I don't feel like there was actually a limit to how much animation we should have included. That if I had more time to do even more animation, that it actually would not have hurt the project in any